Beneath the indifferent gaze of a fractured moon, snowflakes whispered secrets of forgotten loyalties, each one a fragile blade against the skin of the forsaken. Ilara stumbled through the whispering pines, her breath a ragged ghost in the freezing air. The wind clawed at her threadbare cloak, tearing at the edges like the accusations that had driven her from the pack. No wolf stirred within her, no primal fire to warm her veins or sharpen her senses against the encroaching night. She was Omega in name only, marked by the absence that had always defined her, barren of beast, hollow of howl. The elders had called it a curse from the goddess herself, a sign that she could never bind, never birth, never belong. And so, on the eve of the blood moon, they had cast her out, their voices a chorus of ritual condemnation echoing in the great hall of frost-rimed stone. "Leave, Shadow Walker," the Beta enforcer had snarled, his eyes gleaming with the false pity of the righteous. "The pack survives without your weakness." They had stripped her of her woven talisman, the one her mother had pressed into her palm before the fever claimed her. A simple silver locket etched with a crescent moon, its chain cold against her throat even now. She clutched it tightly, the metal biting into her palm, a tether to the life she had scraped from the fringes of the clan. Inside, a lock of her mother's hair, dark as midnight rivers, the only inheritance that mattered. It was no heirloom of power, no enchanted relic to summon allies or bend fates, just a remnant, like her. The forest swallowed her whole, a labyrinth of silver-barked trees bowed under the weight of winter's unrelenting siege. Snow crunched beneath her worn boots, each step a betrayal of her body's frailty. The cold seeped into her bones, a slow venom that blurred the line between pain and numbness. Far behind, the distant weavos of the pack faded into the gale, their triumphant calls mocking her solitude. She had no army, no fangs to bear, no fur to shield her from the storm. Only the locket, swinging like a pendulum against her chest, its faint gleam catching the moonlight filtering through the canopy. Ilara paused at the edge of a frozen stream, its surface a mirror cracked by the night's chill. She knelt, dipping trembling fingers into the ice's embrace, but it yielded nothing, no vision, no whisper from the goddess. Her reflection stared back, hollow-cheeked and shadowed, eyes the color of storm-tossed seas. How many times had she dreamed of this moment, not as exile, but as escape? Yet the reality was a blade twisting deeper. The pack's survival hinged on strength, on the raw pulse of alpha bloodlines and omega fertility. She offered neither. In their eyes, she was a blight, a vessel cracked before it could hold life. The rejection burned hotter than any frostbite, a shame that coiled in her gut like a serpent. As the wind howled louder, carrying the scent of pine resin and distant smoke, Ilara pressed on. The path wound upward toward the jagged peaks of the Silver Fang Range, where the world ended in sheer cliffs and endless white. Legends spoke of hidden vales there, cradles of the old magic, but she had no map, no guide beyond the moon's pale guidance. Her legs ached, muscles screaming from the weight of her meager satchel, dried herbs, a flint for fire, a dagger too small for real defense. The locket warmed slightly against her skin, or perhaps it was delusion, the first flicker of fever from exposure. She imagined her mother's voice in the rustle of branches. "Strength is not in the roar, child, but in the silence that endures." Night deepened, the moon climbing higher, its light bathing the snow in ethereal silver. Ilara's mind wandered to the tales whispered around hearth fires, the alpha kings of old, burdened by crowns forged in blood and betrayal. They too had known exile, their thrones toppled by ambition's cruel hand. But she was no queen, no harbinger of prophecy, just a girl with no wolf, adrift in a world that devoured the weak. A sudden crack echoed through the trees, not thunder but something sharper, wood splintering under force. Ilara froze, heart pounding like war drums in her chest. The wind carried a new scent, iron and earth, mingled with the metallic tang of blood. Her hand flew to the locket, fingers tracing the crescent moon's curve as if it could summon protection. Shadows shifted ahead, a figure emerging from the gloom, cloaked in darkness and desperation. She backed away, breath hitching, but the snow betrayed her, crunching like shattered glass. The stranger collapsed mere paces from her, a low groan escaping lips cracked by cold. Broad shoulders heaved beneath a tattered fur mantle stained with crimson that seeped into the white drifts. His face was half hidden by a hood, but the glint of golden eyes, alpha fierce even in weakness, pierced the night. A king? No, impossible. Yet the air around him thrummed with authority long suppressed, a aura of command wrapped in chains of fate. Alara's instinct screamed to flee, to leave this wounded beast to the wolves that might yet circle. But the locket burned now, an insistent pulse against her heart, as if the moon itself urged her forward. Fear warred with an unfamiliar curiosity, a pull she could not name. In the silence that followed, broken only by his labored breaths, she took a tentative step closer. The snow swirled around them like a veil, concealing what revelations the dawn might bring. What was redemption, if not reaching for the fallen in the heart of the storm? The stranger's groan cut through the wind like a blade through silk, pulling Alara from the paralysis of the moment. She stood rooted in the snow, the locket's chain a cold noose around her neck, its weight now an anchor against the tide of instinct urging her to run. His form sprawled before her, a dark silhouette etched against the moonlit drifts, broad and unyielding even in collapse. Blood stained the snow in irregular patterns, blooming like forbidden roses under the fractured light. The scent of it, coppery, alive, laced with the musk of exertion, invaded her senses, stirring something primal she had long believed dormant. No wolf within her to respond with growl or flight, only the raw thrum of her own pulse echoing the labored rhythm of his breath. She edged closer, boots sinking into the powder with a hush that seemed to mock her caution. Fear coiled in her chest, tight as the elder's judgments, whispering that this was no mere wanderer, but a harbinger of further ruin. Alphas did not fall without purpose. Their wounds were weapons, their weakness a lure. Yet curiosity, that treacherous spark, flickered brighter than dread. Who was he? This shadow felled by the storm? His hood had slipped in the fall, revealing a face carved from the harsh angles of northern stone, high cheekbones scarred by old battles, a jaw shadowed with stubble the color of raven wings. Golden eyes, half-lidded, flickered open, locking onto hers with an intensity that stole the air from her lungs. In them, she saw not the feral hunger of a beast, but a storm-tossed sea, depths roiled by unseen tempests. "You see me," he rasped, voice gravel-rough, carrying the timbre of command long silenced. His hand twitched toward a wound at his side, where crimson seeped through rent leather, but he made no move to rise. Instead, his gaze traced her form, lingering on the locket that gleamed against her collarbone like a captured star. Alara's fingers tightened around it instinctively, the metal warming under her touch, as if alive to his scrutiny. A connection hummed between them, unspoken and electric, like the first crackle of lightning before the thunder. It was not the mate bond of legends, no divine tether snapping into place, but something subtler, a recognition, instinctive and unwelcome, born of shared exile. She knelt at a distance, close enough to feel the heat radiating from his body despite the cold, far enough to bolt if fangs bared. "Who are you?" Her words emerged sharper than intended, laced with the defiance that had kept her alive on the pack's fringes. No answer came at first, only the distant howl of wind through the pines, a mournful chorus that seemed to mourn them both. He coughed, a wet sound that painted his lips with fresh blood, and she flinched, the metallic tang sharpening in the air. "Thorn," he said finally, the name heavy as a crown. "Of the Iron Claw line." Alpha King, the title unspoken but etched in every line of his bearing, the way his shoulders squared even in pain, the subtle flex of muscles honed for throne and battlefield. Whispers of his fall had reached even the lowliest dens. Betrayed by kin, his realm fracturing under rival claws, a monarch cursed to wander without pack or pride. Guilt shadowed his eyes, not the brash remorse of youth, but the melancholic weight of one who had wielded power and found it hollow. And you, carry the moon's mark. Why do you not flee? Alara's breath caught. The locket, her mother's legacy, no talisman of power but a simple vessel, pulsed again, as if the crescent etched upon it mirrored the fractured orb overhead. She rationalized it away, attributing the warmth to her own fevered skin, the pull to mere survival's delusion. Alphas like him devoured the weak. They did not seek solace from shadows. "I have nothing left to lose," she replied, her voice steady despite the tremor in her limbs. Fear warred with an inexplicable draw, curiosity blooming like frost flowers on glass. What wound could humble a king? What guilt could strip him of his roar? Thorn's lips curved in a ghost of a smile, pained and wry. "Then we are kin in ruin." He shifted, wincing as fresh blood welled, and Alara's hand moved of its own accord, pressing a scrap of cloth from her satchel to the gash. The contact seared, his skin fever-hot against the chill, her touch tentative, denied by every lesson of self-preservation. Instinct screamed retreat. This was no salvation but a snare, his golden gaze binding her more surely than chains. Yet in that denial, a fragile thread wove between them, the curiosity of the Forsaken recognizing its mirror. The wind rose, whipping snow into veils that blurred the world to silver and shadow. Distant uivos pierced the night, not the pack's triumphant calls, but something feral, hunting. Thorn's eyes sharpened, alpha senses flaring where hers faltered. "They come," he murmured, hand closing over hers on the wound, a grip firm yet not crushing, as if testing the bond he too resisted. Alara pulled back, heart racing, the locket swinging like a pendulum between fear and fate. What strength was there in aiding the fallen, if not the mercy that alphas forgot? The moon watched, indifferent, as the first shadows of pursuit slithered through the trees, drawing them inexorably toward refuge or ruin. And now, I invite you to leave a trace of your presence in the comments. Tell us where in the world you're watching from and the exact hour you hear this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel and at what moments of the night they find you. The storm's fury masked their flight, snow lashing like whips against Alara's cheeks as she supported Thorn's weight through the labyrinth of pines. His arm draped heavy across her shoulders, a burden of muscle and fever that dragged at her steps. Yet she did not falter. The locket bounced against her chest with each labored stride, its chain a silken tether pulling her deeper into this madness. Blood from his wound soaked through the cloth she'd bound it with, warm and sticky against her side, a reminder that mercy came at the price of her own frailty. No wolf's instincts guided her, only the raw ache in her limbs and the insistent pulse of the silver crescent as if it drank in the night's chaos. Thorn's breath rasped hot against her ear, golden eyes scanning the shadows with a predator's vigilance. "The ridge ahead," he murmured, voice threaded with pain but edged in command. "A cave, old hunter's shelter. We make for it." His free hand gripped the hilt of a dagger at his belt, knuckles white against the leather. The distant howls grew insistent, a pack's chorus slicing through the gale. Not her former kin, but his pursuers. Betas turned traitors, scenting the downfall of their king. Betrayal's scent clung to the wind, sharp as pine sap and iron rage, stirring Alara's gut with a fear she could not outrun. She nodded, words swallowed by the wind's roar, and they pressed on. The forest thinned as they climbed, trees giving way to barren rock slick with ice. Thorn's steps faltered once, twice, his body sagging against her, and in that moment, she felt the full weight of his ruin. Not just flesh wounded, but a soul scarred by the throne's cruel forge. Guilt radiated from him like heat from a dying fire, unspoken confessions in the way his gaze softened when it met hers. Who was this Alpha King, felled not by blade alone but by the shadows of his own decrees? Ilara had known rejection's bite, the pack's cold dismissal, but his carried the echo of commands that had once bent kingdoms. The cave mouth yawned black against the mountainside, framed by icicles like jagged teeth under the moon's fractured gaze. They stumbled inside, the abrupt shelter muffling the storm to a distant wail. Ilara eased Thorn to the ground, his back against the rough wall, where frost-veined stone drank in the scant warmth of their bodies. The air within was stale, heavy with the ghosts of old fires, charred wood and earth, a faint mineral tang that spoke of hidden depths. She fumbled in her satchel for flint and tinder, striking sparks until a flame bloomed in a shallow pit, its golden dance pushing back the dark. Firelight flickered across Thorn's face, illuminating the deep lines of exhaustion, the scar tracing his jaw like a map of forgotten wars. He watched her, unmoving, as she tore another strip from her cloak to reinforce the bandage. Crimson welled anew, but slower now, the flow staunched by her careful hands. "Why?" he asked, the question hanging in the smoke-wreathed air. His voice was low, laced with the melancholy of one who had long questioned his own mercy. "An Omega, cast out. You owe me nothing. Flee while the night hides you." Ilara met his eyes, the fire's glow turning them to molten amber. The locket warmed against her skin, a subtle throb sinking with the flame's crackle. Fear still coiled in her belly, rationalizing this aid as folly. A king's gratitude could turn to possession, his protection to chains. Yet empathy stirred, unbidden, born of shared exile. She saw in him the mirror of her own hollows, the pack that had devoured her worth, the throne that had poisoned his. "Because the cold takes without asking," she replied, her tone steady despite the tremor in her fingers. "And I've known enough of being left to it." The words escaped like a confession, vulnerability cracking her armor. No wolf's roar backed them, only the quiet strength of endurance, the silence her mother had praised. Thorn's hand caught hers as she tied the knot, his touch lingering, a calloused palm against her chilled skin, electric and denied. The connection deepened, not in passion's rush, but in the slow weave of understanding. He was no savior come to claim her, she, no prize to redeem his crown. Yet in the fire's intimate glow, curiosity yielded to something fragile, trust, tentative as the first melt of spring ice. He released her, but the warmth remained, a phantom bond against the encroaching chill. Outside, the howls sharpened, boots crunching snow in relentless pursuit. Thorn tensed, rising unsteadily to peer into the night, his silhouette framed by the cave's mouth like a sentinel carved from shadow. 5, maybe 6, he growled, alpha senses piercing where hers blurred. Rivals from the eastern clans, scenting my blood like jackals. Betrayal's web unfolded in his words, kin turned foe, ambitious betas who had whispered poison in the halls of Ironclaw Keep, fracturing his realm with lies of weakness. Guilt shadowed his confession, the weight of lives lost to his once unyielding rule. I led them to glory and they repay with blades. What king am I, if mercy eludes my grasp? Ilara joined him, the fire's heat at her back a fleeting comfort. The moon hung low, bathing the drifts in silver, illuminating figures slinking through the trees, cloaked hunters, eyes gleaming with feral intent. Her heart hammered, no inner beast to summon courage, only the locket's insistent pulse urging her to stand. She clutched it, the crescent moon etched in silver a talisman against despair. In that moment, empathy bloomed into resolve. They were prey together, exiles bound by the storm's indifferent hand. Then we hold, she said, voice threading with a strength she had not known she possessed. Not for thrones or packs, but because survival demands choice. Thorn turned, his gaze locking with hers, golden depths reflecting the fire's dance, and something deeper, a recognition of the wound they shared. The hunters closed in, shadows lengthening under the lunar gaze, but within the cave, a bond forged in fire and blood began to take root. What was power, if not the mercy to shield another in the face of the abyss? The wind howled its challenge, and Alara felt the first stirrings of a destiny unspoken, the locket burning like a promise against her heart. As the first clash echoed from the night, blade on stone, the line between protector and protected blurred, drawing them into the heart of refuge's trial. The clash erupted like thunder trapped in stone, blades scraping against the cave's icy maw as the hunters breached the threshold. Ilara pressed her back to the rough wall, the fire's embers casting erratic shadows that danced like specters across Thorn's tensed form. His dagger gleamed in the low light, a sliver of forged steel drawn with the precision of a king who had faced down armies, yet now his movements were labored, each breath a rasp against the wound she had bound. The air thickened with the scent of sweat and iron, the metallic bite of blood mingling with the cave's damp earthiness, turning every inhale into a reminder of their fragility. No wolf surged within her to meet the threat, no claws to unsheathe, no growl to unleash, only the frantic hammer of her heart and the locket's insistent warmth, pulsing like a second heartbeat against her throat. The first intruder lunged, a beta cloaked in ragged furs, his eyes wild with the thrill of the hunt under the moon's indifferent gaze. Thorn met him with a savage pivot, blade clashing in a shower of sparks that illuminated the intruder's snarling face. Twisted by betrayal's venom, lips curled over fangs bared in false loyalty. The cave echoed with the grunt of impact, bodies colliding in a tangle of limbs and fury. Alara's hands clenched, nails digging into palms slick with fear sweat, as Thorn drove his opponent back, but two more shadows slithered in, their boots grinding frost into powder. The king was outnumbered, his golden eyes flashing with the desperate fire of one cornered, guilt's shadow flickering in their depths as he parried a blow that grazed his shoulder, reopening old scars. "Stay behind," Thorn growled over his shoulder, voice a low thunder laced with command, but Alara could not obey. The locket burned hotter now, a searing brand that blurred the edges of her vision, as if the silver crescent within it uncoiled like a living vein. Panic clawed at her chest, the cold stone at her back, a cage mirroring her exile's isolation. Why had she lingered? This was no refuge, but a grave, her mercy a fool's tether to a fallen throne. Yet as the third hunter circled, his blade whistling through the air toward Thorn's unguarded flank, something stirred, not instinct, but a deeper unraveling, a gift long buried beneath layers of rejection and silence. The world tilted, the cave's confines expanding in her mind's eye like a map unfurled under lunar light. Visions cascaded, unbidden and vivid, silver threads weaving through the stone, paths hidden in the rock's veins, glowing faintly like veins of moonlight trapped in quartz. They pulsed with direction, whispering of fractures in the wall behind her, a seam where the mountain yielded secrets, a narrow crevice leading to forgotten tunnels beneath the ridge. It was no wolf's sense, no alpha's raw power, but something ethereal, a pathfinder's sight born of the goddess's quiet favor, manifesting in the locket's glow. The metal hummed against her skin, its chain alive with the moon's fractured essence, drawing her gaze to the exact point where escape beckoned. Her breath steadied, the fear receding into clarity, as if the night itself bent to reveal its undercurrents. "Thorn!" Her voice cut through the fray, sharp and unyielding, surprising even herself. He twisted mid-parry, golden eyes locking onto hers amid the chaos, the intruder's blade skimming his arm to draw a fresh line of crimson. Blood splattered the stone, warm droplets flecking her cheek like forbidden tears, but she did not flinch. Instead, she pointed, hand outstretched, the locket swinging free to catch the firelight in a prism of silver. There, the wall. Press here, where the frost weeps. The words flowed from her like prophecy, guided by the visions that now overlaid the physical world. The threads converging on a hidden latch, a door carved by ancient hands for those the moon deemed worthy. Thorn hesitated, a fraction of a second where doubt warred with the Alpha's trust in his senses, but the press of enemies left no room for denial. With a roar that shook the embers, he surged forward, slamming his shoulder into the indicated stone. The rock groaned, a low rumble echoing through the cave as cracks spiderwebbed outward, ice shattering like brittle glass. The hunters faltered, their snarls turning to curses as the wall yielded, revealing a jagged passage yawning into darkness, its mouth exhaling a breath of colder air laced with the mineral tang of subterranean rivers. Thorn seized the moment, dispatching the nearest foe with a precise thrust, blade sinking home in a spray of red that painted the snow-dusted floor, before grabbing Alara's wrist, his grip a lifeline forged in the heat of battle. They plunged into the crevice, the stone scraping at their cloaks as the passage narrowed, muffling the enraged howls behind them. Ilara's visions guided their flight, the silver threads illuminating twists and drops in her mind's eye, her free hand tracing the locket as if consulting a compass etched in starlight. Thorn's breath came in harsh bursts, his wound protesting each scramble over uneven rock, but he did not release her, his presence a solid warmth in the enveloping black. Blood trailed from his arm, the scent sharp and intimate in the confined space, mingling with the earthy dampness that clung to their skin like a second shadow. Deeper in, where the tunnel widened into a chamber veined with glowing quartz under faint lunar seepage from cracks above, they collapsed against the wall. The pursuit's echoes faded, swallowed by the mountain's indifferent bulk. Thorn's eyes, now adjusted to the dim phosphorescence, fixed on her with a reverence that bordered on awe. He reached out, fingers brushing the locket where it rested, warm and pulsing still. You saw it, he murmured, voice threaded with wonder and the melancholy of revelation. Not with eyes of beast, but with the goddess's own sight. The Pathfinder's gift, whispers of it in the old scrolls, omegas marked by the moon to guide the lost thrones back to grace. Guilt lingered in his tone. The weight of his past decrees, banishments for perceived weakness, crowns chased at mercy's expense, now refracted through her quiet power. She was no barren vessel, no shadow to discard. She was the key, her hidden light, the thread to mend his fractured destiny. Alara's chest tightened, the visions receding like tide, leaving her trembling in their wake. The locket cooled against her skin, but its secret hummed within her, a dormant fire kindled by crisis. Fear of this power warred with a nascent pride, the rejection's sting yielding to purpose. Thorn's hand covered hers over the silver, a touch that spoke of bonds beyond the physical, redemption glimpsed in the dark, where an omega's silence proved louder than any howl. The mountains sighed around them, the moon's light filtering through unseen fissures, bathing them in silver promise. What was destiny, if not the revelation that the Forsaken held the map to salvation? As distant Uivos mourned their escape, the weight of unspoken fates settled, drawing them toward trials yet to unfold. Subscribe if you believe mercy can crown even the fallen. The quartz-veined chamber held its breath, the faint lunar seepage casting elongated shadows that twisted like accusations across the damp stone. Alara's fingers trembled as she withdrew her hand from Thorn's grasp, the locket settling against her chest with a final, resonant throb. Its silver crescent, now etched deeper in her awareness, felt less like a relic and more like a key unlocked, its warmth a lingering echo of the visions that had saved them. The air down here was thick, laced with the mineral bite of underground rivers and the coppery residue of Thorn's blood, which had trailed them like a scarlet thread through the labyrinth. No howls penetrated the mountain's bulk, but the silence pressed heavier than pursuit, heavy with the revelations that bound them. Thorn leaned against the wall, his golden eyes dimmed by exhaustion, yet sharpened by the weight of what he had witnessed. Blood seeped anew from his wounds, staining the rock in dark rivulets that mirrored the guilt etching his features. He was no longer just the fallen king. In her sight, he was a mosaic of fractures, crown forged in iron, shattered by the very oaths he had sworn. "The Pathfinder," he repeated softly, the words a prayer and a burden, his voice carrying the melancholy timbre of one who had long sought redemption in the wrong shadows. "I dismissed the tales as superstition, relics of a softer age, banishments for those without the beast's fire. My decrees echoed the elder's cruelty." His gaze dropped, fingers tracing the scar along his jaw, a mark from battles where mercy had been a luxury he could not afford. Now, it seemed, the goddess twisted fate's blade, making an Omega's hidden light the salve for his wounds. Ilara's throat tightened, the locket's chain a cool reminder against her fevered skin. Pride warred with the ache of old rejections. Her gift was no triumphant roar, but a quiet unraveling, born of the silence that had defined her exile. She had led them here, through veins of stone unseen by alpha eyes, yet the power felt fragile, a flame guttering in the draught of doubt. "It's not a crown," she murmured, her voice threading through the dim glow like frost on glass. "Just sight in the dark. What does it change for you?" Freedom tugged at her, the temptation to slip away into these tunnels, to claim the liberty her banishment had mockingly promised. Love, or whatever fragile bond stirred between them, was a chain she had not sought, rationalized as survival's illusion, even as his presence anchored her. Before Thorn could answer, a low rumble stirred the chamber, dust sifting from the ceiling like ash from a dying fire. The mountain shifted, not in collapse, but in revelation. The quartz veins pulsed brighter, silver threads weaving outward in her mind's eye once more. Visions flooded her, passages converging on a hidden ascent, emerging not into wilderness, but toward the heart of Ironclaw lands, where torchlight flickered on snow-swept battlements. The locket burned, urging her forward, but dread coiled in its wake. To guide him home was to confront the ruins of his kingdom, the pack that had cast her out mirroring the traitors who hunted him. Yet to abandon him now, in this subterranean limbo, was to choose isolation over the tentative empathy that had bloomed in the cave's firelight. They moved at her direction, Thorn's hand steadying her elbow in the narrow climbs, his touch a denied comfort, warm against the chill that seeped from the stone. Blood dotted their path, his scent mingling with hers in the confined air, an intimate mark of their shared peril. Hours blurred into a cadence of labored breaths and scraping boots, the moon's influence waning as dawn's gray promise filtered through fissures above. Ilara's visions sharpened with proximity to the surface, rival alphas circling the keep's outer walls, banners of eastern clans snapping in the wind like accusations. Thorn's brother, the traitor, whispers in the threads painted him clear. Ambitious, silver-tongued, his betrayal a poisoned chalice offered in the throne room under a blood moon. They emerged into a copse of frost-laced pines on the kingdom's fringe, the air crisp with the scent of wood smoke and steel. The Silver Fang Range loomed behind, but ahead stretched the Ironclaw domain, a fortress of jagged spires wreathed in snow, its gates barred against the encroaching dawn. Weavos rose from the walls, a cacophony of loyalty fractured, some defiant, others laced with the rivals' snarls. Thorn stiffened beside her, golden eyes hardening into the mask of kingship, yet guilt softened their edges as he surveyed the siege. "Kyle," he growled, naming the brother whose shadow loomed largest in the visions. "He wears my crown in mockery, promising strength where I offered only duty's chains." Ilara's heart pounded. the locket pulsing in rhythm with the distant drums of war. Figures patrolled the tree line, scouts from her old pack, allied now with the eastern rivals, their eyes gleaming with the same righteous scorn that had banished her. Recognition flashed in one's gaze as they spotted the pair, a beta enforcer, his face twisted in disbelief and fury. "The Shadow Walker," he spat, drawing steel that caught the first light. "And the fallen king, goddess's jest, delivering you both to judgment." More emerged from the snow, encircling them with blades drawn, the air thick with the tang of oiled metal and brewing violence. Thorn stepped forward, shielding her instinctively, his voice a low thunder. "Stand down. This realm bleeds for ambition's sake. Kale's blades thirst for power, not protection." But the scouts advanced, driven by the traitor's web, their howls summoning reinforcements. Alara's visions flared, paths through the fray, silver threads leading to the gates where loyalists wavered, torn between oath and fear. The choice loomed, moral and visceral: flee into the wilds, claiming freedom at the cost of his redemption, or guide him through the storm, risking war's maw for a bond that demanded forgiveness over vengeance. She clutched the locket, its warmth a fire against the cold dawn. Thorn turned to her, eyes pleading yet resolute, the weight of his guilt a mirror to her own dilemmas. "Alara, the Pathfinder's light could rally them, turn betrayal to fealty, but I will not chain you to my ruins." Love resisted, rationalized as duty's shadow, yet acceptance stirred in the blood-streaked snow. To forgive the pacts that had scarred them both, her exile, his throne's betrayals, meant choosing compassion over the liberty of solitude. The first blade whistled toward Thorn, and her hand rose, visions igniting the air with unseen roots. War or mercy? The moon's fading gaze watched as the uprising spark kindled in her silence, demanding a verdict that could crown or shatter them all. What was true strength, if not the grace to heal the wounds of the past amid the clash of steel and shattered loyalties? The scouts closed in like shadows birthed from the dawn's reluctant light, their blades carving arcs through the crisp air, each swing a verdict on the exiles before them. Alara's visions bloomed vivid and unrelenting, silver threads weaving through the fray like the moon's own veins, illuminating fractures in the encircling line, gaps where loyalty wavered, paths that snaked toward the fortress gates where Thorn's true kin stirred in doubt. The locket seared against her skin, a living ember pulsing with the goddess's fractured will, its crescent etching deeper into her awareness as if the metal itself bled light. No wolf's fury fueled her, only this quiet unraveling, a gift forged in rejection's forge, now demanding she wield it not for flight, but for the mending of shattered oaths. Thorn surged ahead, his body a barrier of scarred resolve, dagger flashing in the gray half-light to parry the beta enforcer's thrust. Blood from his wounds trailed in the snow, crimson petals unfurling behind him, a stark testament to the guilt that had hollowed his reign. "Alara, go!" he commanded, voice raw with the alpha's instinct to shield, yet laced with the melancholy of one who knew chains of protection could bind as surely as iron. But she did not flee. The scouts' faces twisted in familiar scorn, the same elders' echoes that had branded her shadow walker barren of beast and worth. To run now was to embrace the liberty of solitude, a freedom bought with his fall, leaving the kingdom to Kale's venomous grasp. Love, resisted through nights of denial and rationalized as mere survival's tether, crystallized in that moment. Not a reward, but a redemption carved from choice, demanding she heal the wounds her own exile mirrored. Her hand rose, palm outstretched, the locket swinging free to catch the first blush of dawn in a prism of silver and gold. The visions sharpened, threads converging on the enforcer's hesitation, a flicker in his eyes, the scent of divided fealty clinging to him like frost. "See," she whispered, her voice threading through the clash like wind through pines. Not a command, but an invocation. The air hummed, the locket's warmth radiating outward, and in her mind's eye, she traced the path. A silver line leading to the beta's scarred wrist, where an old iron-claw brand lay hidden beneath his sleeve, a mark of oaths unbroken. The gift manifested not in force, but in revelation, the goddess's light peeling back illusions, exposing the truth of loyalties fractured by Kale's lies. The enforcer faltered mid-swing, his blade dipping as the vision's echo touched him, unbidden. Memories of Thorn's mercy in forgotten battles, the king's hand sparing lives where rivals would have spilled blood for glory. "Sire?" The word escaped him like a weevo stifled, doubt cracking his snarl. More scouts wavered, the silver threads pulsing brighter, Ilara's sight guiding her words like a map etched in starlight. "Kyle promises strength in betrayal," she called, her tone steady despite the tremor in her limbs, the cold dawn biting at her exposed skin. "But the moon reveals the rot. Your true alpha bleeds for the pack you swore to, not the throne's shadow." The locket burned hotter, a sacrificial fire, drawing from her own reserves. Visions drained her, leaving hollows where fear once nested, but in their place bloomed resolve, the renascimento of one long deemed empty. Thorn pressed the breach, his golden eyes locking onto hers amid the swirl of steel and snow, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. The bond accepted, not in passion's blaze, but in the quiet union of shared scars. He disarmed the enforcer with a precise twist, not killing, but subduing, his mercy a deliberate echo of her light. The scouts broke, some fleeing into the tree line with howls of confusion, others turning, blades lowering as the visions rippled outward like waves on a frozen lake. Word spread through the copse, weevos shifting from rage to uncertainty, summoning the fortress's guards who peered from the battlements, their silhouettes etched against the rising sun. By the time they reached the gates, the dawn had painted the snow in hues of rose and steel, the locket cooling against Ilara's chest like a heart sated. Thorn's loyalists emerged, faces gaunt with siege's toll, eyes widening at the sight of their king supported by the Omega who had once been whispered of as curse. Kale's forces massed on the outer walls, his brother's banner, a twisted claw, snapping defiantly, but half the kingdom stirred now, the Pathfinder's light unraveling the traitor's web. Thorn faced them from the threshold, his voice a low thunder carrying over the wind. "I return not as conqueror, but as one humbled by the moon's truth. Mercy, not might, crowns us." Guilt's shadow lifted fractionally from his features, the weight of past banishments, echoes of Ilara's own, yielding to forgiveness's fragile dawn. Ilara stood beside him, the locket a quiet sentinel, its chain no longer a noose, but a bridge. She had led the uprising not with army or fang, but with the silence that endured, her gift the key to his cure. Sacrifice had woven through their path, the blood in the snow, the vision's toll on her frailty, but union bloomed from it, a love that proved redemption's proof. As the gates groaned open, half his kingdom kneeling in the drifts, their oaths renewed under the fading moon, Thorn's hand found hers, calloused fingers intertwining with a tenderness born of trials. The wind carried distant weevos of reconciliation, the air scented with pine and fresh-fallen snow, the world remade in the balance of compassion over conquest. In the great hall later, torchlight flickering on frost-rimed walls, Thorn drew her aside, golden eyes soft with the melancholy of rebirth. "You healed what blades could not," he murmured, tracing the locket's curve. Ilara leaned into him, the warmth of his presence chasing the chill of exile, her voice a whisper against his shoulder. "And you taught me strength is choosing the light, even when it blinds." The kingdom knelt not to power, but to the grace that had guided them through storm and stone, the Omega's silence louder than any roar. Under the moon's watchful eye, now whole in the morning sky, they stood as one, renovados, bound by the destiny that rejection had forged into unbreakable fealty. What was love, if not the ultimate renascimento, where wounds became wings, and the forsaken claimed the throne of the heart? If your heart beat alongside ours, like, comment, and subscribe. Because every soul that joins our moon keeps the flame of redemption alive.